The sound of shattering china echoed through the dining room as Helena Grayson hurled her mother's precious teapot against the wall, watching porcelain fragments scatter across the Persian rug like broken promises. Her father stood in the doorway, his face reddening with fury, while her mother clutched her pearls with trembling fingers. They had just informed her that in 3 days' time she would marry Theodore Bancroft, a railroad magnate twice her age whom she had met exactly once at a garden party in San Antonio. The year was 1876, and Helena had just turned 19 years old that spring, full of dreams that did not involve becoming the decorative wife of a man who viewed her as another asset to acquire alongside his extensive property holdings. "You will do as you are told," her father bellowed, his voice carrying through their expansive home on the outskirts of Trinity, Texas. "The Bancroft fortune will secure our family's future. Your feelings on the matter are irrelevant." Helena stared at the man who had raised her, wondering when exactly he had stopped seeing her as his daughter and started viewing her as livestock to be sold to the highest bidder. Her mother remained silent, as she always did, a living example of what Helena's future would become if she stayed. That night, as the household slept, she packed a small carpet bag with practical clothing, the money she had saved from birthday gifts over the years, and her grandmother's silver locket. She left no note. There was nothing left to say to people who had already decided her life without consulting her heart. The moon hung low and bright as she slipped out through the kitchen door, her riding boots crunching softly on the gravel path that led to the stables. Her mare, Daisy, nickered softly in recognition. Helena had always been good with horses, spending more time in the stables than in the parlor, much to her mother's dismay. She saddled Daisy with practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She knew the risk she was taking. A young woman alone in Texas territory faced dangers that proper society ladies whispered about behind their fans. But the alternative, a lifetime trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who would control every aspect of her existence, seemed far worse than whatever dangers the open road might hold. She rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between herself and Trinity before dawn broke. The landscape stretched endlessly before her, mesquite trees casting long shadows in the early morning light. By the time the sun climbed high enough to burn away the coolness of night, Helena estimated she had covered nearly 20 miles. Daisy needed rest, and truthfully, so did she. Her legs ached from the long ride, and her stomach growled insistently, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday's dinner. She found a creek where cottonwood trees provided shade and let Daisy drink while she refilled her canteen. As she knelt by the water's edge, splashing her face to wash away the dust and exhaustion, she heard the unmistakable sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving fast. Her heart seized in her chest. Had her father sent men after her already? She grabbed Daisy's reins and pulled the mare behind a thick cluster of brush, holding her breath as the riders came into view. There were 5 of them, rough-looking men with guns holstered at their hips and the kind of hard eyes that had seen too much violence. They were not her father's men. Somehow that realization brought no comfort. Helena pressed herself lower against the ground, praying they would pass by without noticing her. Daisy, bless her loyal heart, remained perfectly still and quiet. "Should make camp here," one of the men said, his voice carrying across the water. "Horses need rest before we hit the next town." Helena's mind raced. She could not stay hidden forever. If they decided to water their horses at this creek, they would discover her immediately. If she tried to mount Daisy and ride away now, they would certainly hear her and give chase. She was trapped, and the options before her were all terrible. She decided to wait, hoping they would settle on the opposite bank and she could slip away once they were distracted with making camp. Fate, however, had other plans. Daisy, despite her earlier cooperation, chose that moment to shake her head, causing her bridle to jingle. The sound cut through the quiet afternoon like a gunshot. All 5 men turned toward the brush where Helena hid. "Well now, what do we have here?" The man who spoke dismounted and walked directly toward her hiding spot. There was no point in pretending anymore. Helena stood, lifting her chin with a defiance she did not entirely feel, and stepped out into the open. "I am just passing through," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I mean no trouble." The men exchanged glances, and something in their expressions made her skin crawl. The leader, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, looked her up and down in a way that made her want to scrub herself clean. "Little lady like you, all alone out here. That does not seem safe. Maybe you should ride with us. We will keep you protected." The way he said the word protected made it clear he meant the exact opposite. Helena's hand moved instinctively to her pocket, where she had hidden a small folding knife. It would be useless against 5 armed men, but it was all she had. "I appreciate the offer, but I prefer traveling alone." She tried to step backward toward Daisy, but 2 of the men had already moved to flank her, cutting off her escape route. "Now, that is not very friendly," the scarred man said, taking another step closer. "We are just trying to help." The crack of a rifle shot split the air and dust exploded at the scarred man's feet. Everyone froze. Helena's eyes darted toward the source of the shot and saw a rider emerging from the tree line on the far side of the creek. He sat tall in the saddle, his rifle still raised to his shoulder, aimed directly at the group of men surrounding her. "The lady said she prefers traveling alone," the newcomer called out, his voice carrying clear authority despite its calm tone. "I suggest you gentlemen respect her wishes and move along." The scarred man's hand drifted toward his gun, but the rider fired another shot, this one even closer. "I would not do that if I were you. I have got 7 more rounds in this Winchester, and I do not miss." There was a long, tense moment where the outcome could have gone either way. Helena held her breath, acutely aware that she was standing in the middle of a potential gunfight. Finally, the scarred man raised his hand slowly. "No need for trouble, friend. We were just offering assistance to a lone traveler." "And now I am offering assistance," the rider said. "Mount up and ride out, now." The 5 men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. The rider kept his rifle trained on them, unmoving. Eventually, survival instinct won over whatever plans they had been forming. They backed toward their horses, mounted up, and rode off in the direction they had come from, throwing dark looks over their shoulders. The rider did not lower his weapon until they had disappeared from sight. Only then did he guide his horse across the creek toward Helena. As he drew closer, she got her first clear look at her rescuer. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. His face was sun-bronzed and handsome in a rugged, weathered way that spoke of long days spent outdoors. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his shirt dusty from travel, his boots worn but well-maintained. "You all right, miss?" he asked, finally lowering the rifle and securing it back in its saddle holster. Helena realized she was shaking. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the fear she had been holding at bay came flooding through. "Yes, thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along when you did." He dismounted and walked toward her, his movements careful and non-threatening, as if she were a skittish horse that might bolt. Those were Crenshaw's men. They run with a gang that operates between here and the Oklahoma Territory. You are lucky I was tracking them. You are a lawman. Helena asked, though his clothing suggested otherwise. A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched his lips. Not exactly. Name is Yates Xavier. I track people and things for money. Sometimes for the law, sometimes for private citizens. Right now I am working for the territorial marshal, trying to figure out where Crenshaw's gang holes up between robberies. He gestured to her carpet bag and travel-worn appearance. You running from something or towards something? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She considered lying but found herself too exhausted for deception. Away from something, an arranged marriage I do not want. Yates nodded as if this made perfect sense. Family trying to marry you off to some rich fellow you never met. Close enough, Helena said. They gave me 3 days' notice, as if I were hiring new house staff instead of binding my entire life to a stranger. And so you ran. It was not a question. Yates looked at her with what might have been respect. Brave thing to do, foolish maybe, but brave. Where are you headed? Helena realized she had not thought that far ahead. Her entire focus had been on escape, not on what came after. I have an aunt in San Angelo. We corresponded when I was younger, before my parents cut off contact with her. She married against my grandfather's wishes. I thought perhaps she might understand and take me in. San Angelo is over 100 miles from here, Yates said. Going to take you several days to get there, and you just saw what kind of men travel these roads. You have any experience with a gun? No, Helena admitted. My father believed women should focus on needlework and piano, not practical skills. Yates was quiet for a moment, clearly considering something. Finally, he said, I am headed west myself, toward El Dorado. That is on the way to San Angelo. If you want, you can ride with me for protection. I will make sure you get there safely. Helena studied him carefully. She had just escaped one situation where men thought they could control her life. How did she know this stranger was any different from the men he had just chased off? But then again, he had already had the perfect opportunity to take advantage of her vulnerability, and instead had put himself at risk to protect her. Her instincts, which had served her well with horses if not with people, told her she could trust him. Why would you help me? She asked. What do you want in return? Nothing, Yates said simply. Maybe I just do not like seeing women forced into things they do not want. Maybe I've got sisters of my own and would hope someone would help them if they were in trouble. He paused. Or maybe I am just tired of only tracking the worst humanity has to offer and would like to do one decent thing this month. There was a weariness in his voice that spoke of hard experiences. Helena made her decision. All right, I accept your offer. Thank you, Mr. Xavier. Just Yates is fine, he said. We should get moving. Those men might come back with reinforcements, and I would rather not be here if they do. They rode together through the afternoon, Yates setting a steady pace that covered ground without exhausting the horses. He was not much for idle conversation, which suited Helena fine. She was still processing everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Every mile they traveled took her further from the life she had known and deeper into an uncertain future. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Yates guided them to a sheltered spot among some rocks where they could make camp for the night. He built a small fire while Helena tended to the horses, grateful for a task that felt familiar and normal. You know your way around horses, Yates observed as he watched her efficiently remove Daisy's saddle and check her hooves for stones. I spent more time in the stables than anywhere else growing up, Helena said. Much to my mother's horror. She thought I should be practicing my embroidery and learning to arrange flowers. Those skills going to keep you alive out here? Yates asked, and there was a hint of humor in his voice. No, Helena admitted, which is why I am grateful you came along when you did. She settled beside the fire, accepting the piece of dried beef and hardtack he offered her. It was a far cry from the elaborate meals her family's cook prepared, but she found she was too hungry to care. They ate in companionable silence. As darkness fell completely and stars began appearing overhead, countless and bright in a way they never seemed in town, Helena found herself studying her companion. There was something solid and dependable about him, a quietness that came from confidence rather than shyness. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Sure. You mentioned sisters. Do you have family around here?" Yates poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. "Had 3 sisters and a brother. They are all back in Missouri with my parents. I am the one who could not settle, kept needing to see what was over the next hill. Drove my mother crazy with worry." His expression softened. "I write them when I can. Let them know I am still alive and have not been shot or trampled by a stampede." "Do you ever think about going back?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But not yet. Still got too much restlessness in me. Besides, the work I do out here, tracking criminals and lost people, it matters. Feels like I am doing something worthwhile." He looked at her. "What about you? You going to miss your family?" Helena considered this. "I will miss who I thought they were, the parents I imagined I had who cared about my happiness. But the people who tried to sell me into a marriage like I was property? No, I will not miss them at all." "That is honest," Yates said. "Most people would pretty it up, talk about duty and obligation." "I spent my whole life being told what a proper lady should say and do," Helena said, surprised by the bitterness in her own voice. "I think I am done pretending. If I am going to choose my own path, I might as well be honest while I am at it." Yates smiled, a real one this time that reached his eyes. "I think your aunt in San Angelo is going to like you just fine." Helena felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her like she was interesting rather than decorative. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders and settled against her saddle, using it as a pillow. "You should get some sleep," Yates said. "I will take first watch, make sure nothing and nobody bothers us during the night." "You need sleep too," Helena protested. "I will rest later. I am used to keeping irregular hours." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. Helena closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of night creatures. Despite the hard ground and unfamiliar surroundings, exhaustion pulled her under quickly. She dreamed of wide open spaces and endless horizons, of riding Daisy with no destination in mind, free in a way she had never been before. She woke to the smell of coffee brewing and dawn light painting the sky pink and gold. Yates was crouched by the fire, looking as alert as if he had slept a full 8 hours instead of keeping watch all night. He handed her a tin cup of coffee without comment, and she accepted it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "How far to the next town?" she asked after taking a sip. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased away the lingering fog of sleep. "Sonora is about 15 miles from here," Yates said. "We can stock up on supplies there if you need anything. After that, it is another 2 days' ride to San Angelo, maybe 3 if we take it easy on the horses." They broke camp efficiently, falling into an easy rhythm of shared tasks. Helena found she liked the simplicity of this life on the trail, where survival needs took precedence over social niceties and meaningless conventions. There was something honest about it, straightforward in a way her previous life had never been. As they rode that morning, Yates began teaching her basic safety skills. He showed her how to be aware of her surroundings, to look for signs of other travelers, to read the landscape for places where danger might hide. He taught her how to properly hold and aim his rifle, though he did not waste ammunition letting her practice shooting. "The sound carries too far," he explained. "Last thing we need is to advertise our location, but at least now you know the basics. If you are serious about making your own way in the world, you need to know how to protect yourself." Helena absorbed everything like a sponge, hungry for knowledge that might keep her alive and independent. She asked questions constantly, and Yates answered with patience, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that must have seemed obvious to someone with his experience. They reached Sonora by early afternoon. It was a small town, dusty and wind-worn, existing primarily to serve ranchers and travelers passing through. Yates guided them to the general store, where Helena purchased additional supplies with her carefully hoarded money. The storekeeper's wife gave her curious looks, clearly wondering about the young woman traveling with a rough-looking tracker. But Helena met her gaze steadily until the woman looked away. As they were leaving the store, a man in a marshal's badge approached Yates. "Xavier, heard you were tracking the Crenshaw gang. Any luck?" Yates shook his head. "Ran into some of his men yesterday near Cedar Creek, but they scattered. I have got a few ideas about where they might be headed, but nothing solid yet." The marshal's eyes drifted to Helena. "Who is your companion?" "Someone I am escorting to San Angelo," Yates said, his voice carefully neutral but firm enough to discourage further questions. The marshal seemed to take the hint. "Well, be careful out there. We had reports of increased gang activity in the area. Seems like every outlaw in Texas is getting bolder these days." As they rode out of town, Helena asked, "Do you always travel alone when you are tracking criminals? That seems dangerous." "Usually," Yates said. "Most trackers work alone. Easier to move quietly, and you do not have to worry about anyone else giving away your position." He glanced at her. "Present company accepted." "I am sorry if I am slowing you down or interfering with your work," Helena said, guilt suddenly flooding through her. She had been so focused on her own situation that she had not fully considered how her presence might be affecting him. "You are not," Yates assured her. "Truth is, I was getting close to burning out anyway. Spending months chasing violent men through the wilderness, it wears on you after a while. Sometimes you start to forget there are good people in the world worth protecting. Helping you, it reminds me why I do this work in the first place." There was something vulnerable in his admission that made Helena's heart squeeze. She found herself wanting to know more about this quiet man who had appeared in her moment of greatest need. "How did you become a tracker?" Yates was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Grew up on a farm in Missouri. My father raised cattle, and I learned young how to follow trails, find lost stock, read signs in the dirt and grass. When the war came, I was too young to fight, but by the time it ended, I was 17 and restless. Heard about opportunities out west tracking work that needed doing. Turned out I had a talent for it." "Do you like the work?" Helena asked. "Most days," Yates said. "There is a satisfaction in finding someone or something that is lost, bringing criminals to justice. But it is lonely work, and you see the worst of people more often than the best." He paused. "What about you? What did you want to be before your parents decided to marry you off?" No one had ever asked Helena that question before. She had to think about her answer. "I do not know," she admitted finally. "I never thought I had a choice. My whole life was laid out for me from birth. I would grow up, marry well, produce heirs, run a household, and die having never made a single real decision about my own existence." She looked out at the endless landscape surrounding them. "But now, I think maybe I would like to work with horses, breed them, train them. I am good with them in a way I never was with people." "That is honest work," Yates said. "World always needs good horse trainers. Your aunt have property where you could do something like that." "I do not know," Helena said. I have not seen her since I was 10 years old. My parents cut off all contact after she married a ranch hand instead of the banker they had chosen for her. I do not even know if she will remember me, much less take me in. Well, if she does not, we will figure something else out, Yates said, and the casual way he said we made Helena's breath catch slightly. They camped that night near a small spring, the water cold and clear. After they had eaten, Yates surprised her by pulling out a battered harmonica from his saddlebag and playing a few slow, melancholy tunes. The music drifted through the evening air, beautiful and lonely. I did not know you were musical, Helena said when he paused. My mother insisted all her children learn an instrument, Yates explained. Most of my siblings chose piano or violin. I picked the harmonica because it was small enough to carry with me. He played a few more notes, then put it away. Helps pass the time on long nights. It is beautiful, Helena said softly. Thank you for sharing it. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness deepened around them. Helena found herself increasingly aware of Yates's presence, the solid warmth of him across the fire. There was something about him that made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. Her father had been distant and authoritarian, more concerned with his business dealings than his daughter's well-being. But Yates, this stranger who owed her nothing, had stepped into danger to protect her and was now guiding her toward safety without asking anything in return. "Can I ask you something personal?" Helena said suddenly. Yates looked up from the fire. "Sure. Have you ever been in love?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Once, maybe. There was a girl back in Missouri before I left. Her name was Sarah, and we talked about getting married someday. But I had this need to see what else was out there, and she wanted to stay close to her family. In the end, we wanted different things." He met Helena's eyes across the fire. "She married someone else a few years back. I hope she is happy." "Do you regret not staying?" Helena asked. "No," Yates said firmly. "I would have ended up resenting her for something that was not her fault. Better to have gone our separate ways while we still had good feelings for each other." He paused. "What about you? Was there anyone you cared about before the arranged marriage?" Helena shook her head. "I was not allowed to associate with anyone my parents did not approve of. The few young men I met at social functions were all cut from the same cloth, boring, entitled, convinced of their own importance. I used to wonder if there was something wrong with me, that I could not make myself feel what I was supposed to feel." She looked down at her hands. "My mother told me that love was not important in marriage, that respect and duty were enough. But I watched her life, and there was no joy in it. Just endless days of managing servants and hosting parties and pretending to be happy. I could not accept that future for myself." "There is nothing wrong with you," Yates said with quiet conviction. "You are just a person who refuses to settle for less than you deserve. That is not a flaw, it is strength." Helena felt tears prick at her eyes. Those simple words, spoken with such certainty, touched something deep inside her that had been wounded by years of being told she was selfish and ungrateful for wanting more than the life her parents had planned. "Thank you," she whispered. Yates looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought he might say something more, but instead, he stood and added another piece of wood to the fire. "You should get some rest. We have another long day tomorrow." Helena lay down wrapped in her blanket, her mind racing despite her body's exhaustion. She found herself thinking about Yates, about the kindness in his eyes and the gentleness of his hands when he had helped her down from her horse earlier. She barely knew him, had met him only yesterday, yet she felt more connected to him than she had to anyone in her previous life. It was confusing and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The next day brought punishing heat. The sun beat down mercilessly as they rode, and even the steady breeze offered little relief. Yates kept them moving at a careful pace, making sure to stop regularly to water the horses and rest in whatever shade they could find. He showed her how to drape a damp cloth around her neck to stay cooler and made her drink from her canteen more frequently than she thought necessary. Heat exhaustion will sneak up on you, he explained. By the time you realize something is wrong, you are already in serious trouble. Better to prevent it in the first place. As they rode, Helena found herself watching him. The way he sat his horse with easy confidence, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for potential threats, the way he moved with an economy of motion that spoke of someone completely at home in his body and his environment. She wondered what he thought of her, whether he saw her as an obligation or something more. They stopped for a midday rest near a cluster of mesquite trees. As Helena stretched her legs, grateful to be out of the saddle for a while, Yates suddenly went very still, his attention fixed on something in the distance. "What is it?" Helena asked quietly. "Riders," Yates said. "3 of them coming fast from the north." His hand moved to rest on his rifle. Could be nothing, could be trouble. They waited, tense and alert as the riders drew closer. As they came into view, Helena felt her stomach drop. Even at a distance, she recognized the lead horse, a distinctive gray gelding that belonged to her father's head stable hand, Marcus. "That is them," she breathed. "My father's men, he sent them after me." Yates's jaw tightened. "How far do you want this to go? If you want to go back, I will not stop you, but if you want to keep running, I will make sure they do not take you." Helena did not hesitate. "I am not going back. I would rather die out here than spend my life as Theodore Bancroft's property." "Then get behind those rocks," Yates said, gesturing to a formation that would provide cover. "And stay down no matter what happens." Helena did as he instructed, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She watched as Yates positioned himself between her hiding spot and the approaching riders, his rifle held ready but not yet raised. He looked utterly calm, as if facing down 3 armed men was just another ordinary day. The riders pulled up about 20 yards away. Marcus sat in the center, flanked by 2 ranch hands Helena recognized but whose names she had never learned. Marcus was a hard man in his 40s, loyal to her father and known for his willingness to do whatever necessary to complete a task. "Morning," Yates called out, his voice friendly but his posture anything but relaxed. "We are looking for Helena Grayson," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the area and clearly spotting Daisy. "Her father sent us to bring her home. She ran away a few days ago and her family is worried sick." "Is that so?" Yates said. "And you are authorized to take her by force if necessary?" Marcus's expression hardened. "We are authorized to do whatever is necessary to bring her home where she belongs. Now, I do not know who you are or why you are helping her, but this is a family matter. Step aside." "Here is the thing," Yates said conversationally. "The lady does not want to go back. Said so herself. And last I checked, a 19-year-old woman was entitled to make her own decisions about where she goes and who she associates with. Her father has legal authority over her until she marries," Marcus said. "He wants her home and we are taking her. You can step aside peacefully or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." "I am going to have to go with option 3, Yates said. "The one where you turn around and ride back to Trinity and tell Mr. Grayson that his daughter is safe and well, and that she will contact him if and when she decides she wants to. That seems like the best option for everyone involved." Marcus's hand moved toward his gun, and suddenly Yates's rifle was up and aimed at the center of Marcus's chest. The movement was so fast Helena almost missed it. "Do not," Yates said, all friendliness gone from his voice. "You will be dead before your gun clears leather, and your friends there will be next. I am a professional tracker and have been in more gunfights than you have had hot meals. The only question is whether you are stupid enough to test me." There was a long, deadly silence. Helena held her breath, terrified that this was about to turn into bloodshed. Finally, one of the ranch hands spoke up. "Maybe we should go back, Marcus. We can tell Mr. Grayson where she is, and he can get the law involved if he wants." Marcus stared at Yates for another long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spat in the dirt. "This is not over. You are helping a runaway and there will be consequences." "I will worry about that when it happens," Yates said. "Now ride out. And if I see you following us, I will not be nearly as polite next time." The three men turned their horses and rode back the way they had come, but Helena could see the fury in Marcus's posture. This was far from resolved. She emerged from her hiding spot once they were out of sight, her legs trembling. "They are going to come back," she said. "With more men or with the law. My father has influence in Trinity. He will find a way to force me back." "Then we need to get you to San Angelo faster than planned," Yates said. "Once you are with your aunt, you will have someone to vouch for you, someone who can stand up to your father's influence. Can you handle some harder riding?" Helena nodded, drawing strength from his calm confidence. "Yes. Whatever it takes." They rode hard for the rest of the day, pushing the horses as much as they dared. Yates chose a different route than the one they had been following, taking them through rougher terrain that was harder to track through. As the sun began setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of crimson and gold, they found shelter in a small canyon. "We will rest here a few hours, let the horses recover," Yates said. "Then we ride through the night. If we push hard, we can reach San Angelo by tomorrow afternoon." Helena nodded, too tired to do more than dismount and tend to Daisy. Her entire body ached from the hard riding, and she knew tomorrow would be worse. But every mile they covered took her closer to freedom, and that knowledge gave her strength. As darkness fell and they sat by a small, carefully hidden fire, Helena found herself studying Yates again. He was cleaning his rifle, his movements precise and practiced. She thought about how he had faced down 3 armed men to protect her, how he had not hesitated to put himself in danger for someone he barely knew. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. "And do not tell me it is just because you have sisters or because it is the right thing to do. There is more to it than that." Yates looked up from his rifle, and in the firelight his eyes were very serious. "You want the truth?" "Yes." He set the rifle aside and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I spent years tracking criminals, seeing what men do to women who have no protection, no power, no way to fight back. I have seen things that keep me awake at night." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "When I came across you at that creek, and I saw those men surrounding you, I saw a chance to be on the right side of something for once. Not tracking someone who had already been hurt, but preventing harm before it happened." He met her eyes. "And then I started talking to you, learning about who you are, and I realized you are not just someone who needs saving. You are strong and brave and interesting." Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about obligation and became about wanting to make sure someone as remarkable as you has a real chance at the life you deserve. Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. No one had ever spoken to her that way before, as if her thoughts and feelings and choices mattered. "I am not remarkable," she said quietly. "I am just a woman who ran away from a problem instead of finding a way to solve it." "You are a woman who recognized an impossible situation and had the courage to choose herself over everyone else's expectations," Yates corrected. "That is not running away. That is survival." Helena felt something shift inside her, a wall she had not even known existed beginning to crumble. She looked at this man who had entered her life barely 3 days ago and realized with sudden, startling clarity that she was falling in love with him. It was absurd and impossible and completely impractical, but the knowledge settled into her bones with absolute certainty. "Yates," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, when this is over, when I am safely at my aunt's house and you have gone back to your tracking work, will I ever see you again?" The question hung in the air between them. Yates was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Do you want to?" he asked finally. "Yes," Helena said, putting every ounce of truth she possessed into that single word. Yates stood and moved around the fire until he was sitting beside her. He took her hand in his touch warm and gentle. "I have spent a lot of years convincing myself that I was better off alone, that caring about people just meant having more to lose. But these past few days with you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. You make me want things I thought I had given up on." "What things?" Helena asked, her heart racing. "A home, a partner, someone to come back to at the end of the day who actually cares whether I made it back safely." He lifted his other hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "Someone to build a life with." "We barely know each other," Helena breathed, even as she leaned into his touch. "I know enough," Yates said. "I know you are brave and smart and kind. I know you make me laugh and make me think. I know that when I look at you, I see a future I actually want instead of just endless, empty days chasing bad men through the wilderness." He paused. "But I also know you are running from one man trying to control your life. The last thing I want is to be another man telling you what you should do or how you should feel." Helena turned her hand over in his, lacing their fingers together. "You are nothing like Theodore Bancroft or my father. You asked what I wanted. You have been asking since the moment we met. Do you know how rare that is? How revolutionary it feels to have someone actually care about what I think and feel?" She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I am falling in love with you, Yates Xavier. I know it is too soon and too fast and probably foolish, but it is the truth. You make me feel like I matter, like my life has value beyond what I can provide for someone else's ambitions. Being with you these past days, even with all the danger and uncertainty, has been the most alive I have ever felt." Yates made a sound that was half laugh, half sigh of relief. "Thank God," he said, "because I am falling for you too, and I was terrified I was alone in this." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Helena did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with a certainty that eclipsed any doubt. When their lips met, it was soft and sweet and perfect, a kiss that tasted of promise and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably get some sleep," he said reluctantly. "Long ride ahead tomorrow." "Stay close," Helena asked, not wanting to let go of this moment, this connection. "Always," Yates promised. They settled down together, Helena tucked against Yates's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her. For the first time since leaving Trinity, Helena felt truly safe. Not because she was being guarded, but because she was choosing to trust someone who had proven himself worthy of that trust. She fell asleep, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, dreaming of a future that belonged entirely to them. They woke before dawn and rode through the cool pre-morning hours, covering ground quickly. As the sun rose, they shared water and jerky in the saddle, not wanting to waste time stopping. Yates pushed them hard but not recklessly, always aware of the horse's limits. By mid-morning they crested a hill and saw San Angelo spread out in the valley below. It was larger than Trinity, a proper town with multiple streets and substantial buildings. Helena felt a mix of relief and anxiety. This was it, the destination she had been aiming for. But what if her aunt did not remember her? What if she refused to help? As if reading her thoughts, Yates reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, we will figure it out together." "Together," Helena repeated, drawing strength from the word. They rode into town and stopped at the first general store they found. The proprietor, a friendly woman in her 50s, was happy to provide directions when Yates described who they were looking for. "Oh, you must mean Harriet Thornton," the woman said. "She and her husband run a horse ranch about 3 miles east of town. Good people, fair in their dealings." Armed with directions, they rode out to the ranch. Helena's anxiety grew with each passing mile. What would she say to an aunt she had not seen in nearly a decade? How would she explain everything that had happened? The ranch itself was modest but well-maintained, with sturdy fences and a decent-sized barn. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. She was in her early 40s with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and a weathered but kind face. "Can I help you?" she called out. Helena dismounted on shaky legs. "Aunt Harriet, it is Helena, Helena Grayson, your brother's daughter." Harriet's eyes widened in recognition. "Helena, my goodness, look at you. You are all grown up." Her gaze moved to Yates, then back to Helena, clearly trying to piece together the situation. "What brings you all the way out here?" The whole story came pouring out. Helena told her about the arranged marriage, about running away, about Yates rescuing her and agreeing to escort her to San Angelo. She told her about her father's men finding them and the confrontation that had followed. Through it all, Harriet listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When Helena finally finished, Harriet shook her head. "Your father has not changed a bit, I see. Still thinks he can control everyone around him." She looked at Yates. "Thank you for keeping my niece safe. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Yates said simply. Harriet smiled slightly, and Helena saw understanding in her eyes. "Well, you are both welcome here. Come inside. You look like you could use a proper meal and some rest." Over the next hour, sitting in Harriet's comfortable kitchen and eating fresh bread and stew, Helena learned about her aunt's life. She had married for love 16 years ago, choosing a ranch hand named Samuel over the wealthy merchant her family had selected. The Graysons had disowned her completely, refusing all contact, but Harriet had never regretted her choice. "Samuel and I built this ranch from nothing," she said proudly. "It has been hard work, but it is ours. We make our own decisions and answer to no one but ourselves." She looked at Helena with sympathy. "I am sorry I was not there for you all these years. I tried to send letters, but your father returned them unopened." "It is not your fault," Helena assured her. "You could not have known what they were planning." "You can stay here as long as you need," Harriet said. "We have a spare room, and Lord knows we could use help with the horses. I saw how you handled your mare. You have good instincts." She glanced at Yates. "And you are welcome too if you want to stay a while." Yates looked at Helena, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, and relief crossed his features. "I appreciate that," he said. "I have some business to wrap up with the territorial marshal, but after that, if the offer still stands, I would like to take you up on it." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Yates rode into town to meet with the marshal and report what he had learned about the Crenshaw gang's movements. Helena threw herself into ranch work, discovering a deep satisfaction in the physical labor of caring for horses, mending fences, and maintaining the property. Harriet and her husband Samuel, a quiet man with kind eyes, welcomed her completely into their lives. Yates returned each evening, and after dinner, He and Helena would walk together around the property, talking about everything and nothing. They discussed their pasts, their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams. With each conversation, Helena fell more deeply in love with this man who listened to her as if her words mattered, who treated her as an equal partner rather than a possession to be managed. One evening, about a week after their arrival, they sat together on the porch as the sun set. Yates had been quiet all day, clearly wrestling with something. "I have been thinking," he said finally, "about what comes next." Helena's stomach clenched. "Are you leaving?" "No," Yates said quickly. "That is not what I mean." He took her hand. "I wrapped up the Crenshaw job with the marshal, tracked them to their hideout and led a posse to bring them in. The marshal paid me for the work, and he mentioned there is always need for skilled trackers in this area." He paused. "I could stay. Set up a base here in San Angelo, take jobs that keep me close by instead of wandering all over the territory." Hope bloomed in Helena's chest. "You would do that. I would do that for you," Yates said. "For us. Because I want to see where this goes, and I cannot do that if I am hundreds of miles away chasing outlaws." He squeezed her hand. "I love you, Helena. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are who I have been looking for without even knowing I was searching." Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me sometimes." Yates pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars emerge, planning a future that belonged entirely to them. They talked about Yates setting up a tracking business based in San Angelo, about Helena learning horse training from Harriet, about building a life together based on mutual respect and genuine love, rather than obligation and social expectation. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Trinity. Helena recognized her father's handwriting and almost threw it away unopened, but Harriet convinced her to read it. The contents were brief and cold. Her father informed her that he had dissolved the engagement to Theodore Bancroft and that she was no longer welcome in the family home. She was effectively disowned, cut off from the family fortune and social connections. He hoped she was satisfied with the consequences of her selfish actions. Helena read the letter twice, waiting for the pain or regret to hit. Instead, she felt only relief. The last tie binding her to her old life had been severed. She was free. She showed the letter to Yates that evening. He read it, his jaw tightening with anger. "I am sorry. I know that must hurt, regardless of your feelings about them." "It does not hurt the way I expected," Helena admitted. "Mostly I just feel sad for them. They valued money and status over their own daughter's happiness. They are going to spend the rest of their lives trapped in their narrow little world, never understanding what they lost." "Their loss is my gain," Yates said, pulling her into his arms. "Speaking of which, I have something to ask you." Helena pulled back to look at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What?" Yates took both her hands in his, suddenly looking nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I know it has not been long. I know people will say we are rushing into things. But I also know that every day I spend with you makes me more certain that you are the person I want to spend my life with." He took a breath. "Helena Grayson, will you marry me? Not because anyone is forcing you, not because of duty or obligation, but because you choose to. Because you want to build a life with me as much as I want to build one with you." Joy exploded through Helena's entire being. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Yates kissed her then, deep and passionate, a kiss that promised forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Helena realized that Harriet and Samuel were watching from the doorway, both beaming. "About time," Harriet called out. "We have been waiting for you two to figure out what was obvious to everyone else for weeks now." They were married a month later in a simple ceremony in San Angelo's small church. Harriet and Samuel stood as witnesses, along with the marshal and a few other friends Yates had made during his time in town. Helena wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, wildflowers in her hair instead of expensive hothouse blooms. Yates wore his best clothes, which were still the practical garments of a working man rather than a fancy suit, and Helena would not have changed a single thing. When the minister asked if she took this man to be her lawfully wedded husband, Helena said, "I do," with absolute conviction, her voice steady and sure. This time, she was making the choice. This time, she was marrying someone who loved her for who she was, not what she represented or what she could provide. Yates's voice was equally steady when he spoke his vows, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise to love you, honor you, and respect you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, not your master. I promise to always ask what you want instead of telling you what you should do. And I promise that no matter what challenges we face, we will face them together." They celebrated with a simple dinner at the ranch, surrounded by the small circle of people who genuinely cared about them. It was nothing like the elaborate society wedding Helena's mother had always planned for her, and it was perfect precisely because of that. This celebration was real, built on genuine affection rather than social obligation. That night, in the small cabin they had built on a corner of Harriet's property, Helena lay in Yates's arms feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up the wandering life to settle down here?" "Never," Yates said firmly. "I spent years moving from place to place because I was looking for something without knowing what it was. Turns out I was looking for you, for this, for a home that actually means something." He kissed the top of her head. "You are my great adventure, Helena Xavier. Everything else was just practice." Helena smiled against his chest, loving the sound of her new name, Mrs. Helena Xavier. She had chosen it, claimed it, made it her own. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Yates replied. "Now and always." The months that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Yates built up his tracking business, taking jobs that kept him close to San Angelo. He developed a reputation as the best tracker in the region, someone who could find lost people or stolen property faster than anyone else. But he always came home to Helena, never spending more than a few days away. Helena threw herself into learning horse training from Harriet, discovering she had a natural gift for it. She had a way of understanding horses, of reading their moods and needs, that resulted in well-trained animals people traveled from miles around to purchase. Together, she and Yates began saving money, planning to eventually purchase their own property where they could expand the horse training operation. About a year after their wedding, Helena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of emotions. She was happy, excited to start a family with Yates. But she was also terrified, remembering her own childhood and the ways her parents had tried to control every aspect of her life. What if she repeated their mistakes? Yates found her crying on the porch one evening and gently coaxed out her fears. "You are not your parents," he said firmly. "You know what it feels like to have your choices taken away. You would never do that to someone else, especially not your own child." He placed his hand over her still flat stomach. "This baby is going to be so loved, so free to become whoever they want to be. We will make sure of it." His words soothed the worst of her anxiety. Over the next months, as her body changed and grew, Helena found herself actually looking forward to motherhood. She and Yates spent long evenings discussing how they would raise their child, what values they wanted to instill, how they would encourage independence while providing guidance. On a warm spring evening in 1878, with Harriet serving as midwife and Yates holding her hand through every contraction. Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James, and from the moment Helena held him, she understood a depth of love she had never imagined possible. Yates proved to be an attentive, devoted father. He reduced his tracking work to only local jobs so he could be home every night. Helena would watch him holding James, singing softly or telling stories, and fall in love with him all over again. This was the life she had dreamed of without knowing such dreams were possible. A partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. A family created by choice rather than obligation. When James was 2 years old, Helena became pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only excitement. Their daughter, Emma, was born in the autumn of 1880, a tiny creature with her father's serious eyes and her mother's determination. James adored his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. They finally purchased their own property when Emma was a year old, a decent-sized spread with good grazing land and potential for expansion. Yates and Samuel spent months building a house and barn while Helena designed the training facilities. The horse training business grew steadily, earning them a solid reputation throughout the region. Life was not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and lean financial times. But they faced everything together, making decisions as partners, supporting each other through difficulties. The love between them never wavered but instead grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch of their home, watching James and Emma play with their younger brother Thomas, who had arrived 3 years earlier. Yates pulled Helena close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, marveling at everything they had built together. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had married Bancroft?" Yates asked. Helena shuddered. "Sometimes. I imagine I would be trapped in some mansion, miserable and alone even though I would be surrounded by servants. Probably with children I barely knew because nurses would be raising them." She looked up at him. "I would have missed all of this. This life, these children, it does not bear thinking about." "I think about it sometimes too," Yates admitted. "About how close I came to not being at that creek that day. What if I had chosen a different route while tracking those outlaws? What if I had decided to camp somewhere else?" He shook his head. "Feels like the universe conspired to put us in the same place at the same time." "Maybe it did," Helena said. "Or maybe we were just two people brave enough to choose ourselves when everyone else wanted to control us, and that bravery led us to each other." "I like that better," Yates said, kissing her forehead. "Makes it feel like we had agency in our own story instead of being pawns moved around by fate." "We did have agency," Helena said firmly. "I chose to run. You chose to help. We chose each other again and again, despite every obstacle and challenge. That is what makes this meaningful." As the sun set and the children's laughter rang out across their property, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had fled an arranged marriage in terror, with no real plan beyond escape. She had met a cowboy who offered protection and found so much more than safety. She had discovered love, partnership, freedom, and a life built on her own terms. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. James grew into a thoughtful young man who inherited his father's tracking skills and his mother's way with horses. Emma proved to have a head for business, taking over much of the administrative work of the ranch by the time she was 16. Thomas was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book, talking about becoming a teacher. Yates eventually retired from tracking work entirely, focusing instead on the ranch and his family. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years was gone, replaced by contentment in the life he had built. He and Helena aged together gracefully, their love evolving from the passionate intensity of youth into something deeper and more enduring. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. Friends and neighbors from all over the region attended, a testament to the life they had built and the respect they had earned. As Helena stood surrounded by the people she loved, she thought back to that terrified 19-year-old girl who had shattered a teapot and fled into the night. That girl could never have imagined this future. She had been running away, not toward anything, but somehow, through a combination of courage and luck and the love of a good man who saw her as a partner rather than a possession, she had found her way to a life worth living. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "How far we have come," Helena said, leaning back against him. "How different everything turned out from what I expected." "Better or worse?" Yates teased. "Infinitely better," Helena said, turning in his arms to face him. "I love you, Yates Xavier. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life with me." "The pleasure has been entirely mine," Yates said, and kissed her as their children cheered and their grandchildren, James and Emma, both having married and started families of their own, laughed at their grandparents' affection. As the party continued around them, Helena felt a profound sense of peace. She had escaped an arranged marriage and accidentally found her soulmate. More than that, she had found herself, had discovered who she could be when given the freedom to choose her own path. The Wild West had been harsh and unforgiving, full of dangers she could never have anticipated. But it had also given her opportunities she never would have found in the suffocating confines of polite society. It had given her Yates and their children, and this life built on love and mutual respect rather than duty and obligation. Years later, when Helena was in her 70s, her youngest granddaughter asked her about the portrait that hung in the living room, a painting commissioned early in their marriage showing her and Yates standing together in front of their first cabin. "Tell me the story," the girl begged. "How did you and Grandpa meet?" Helena smiled, remembering. "Well," she said, settling into her favorite chair as the child climbed into her lap, "it all started with a teapot and a very bad decision my parents tried to make for me." She told the story then, not glossing over the fear or the danger but emphasizing the choices, the courage, the moment when a cowboy offered protection and they both found something neither had been looking for. She told it as a love story, because that is what it had always been, a tale of two people brave enough to choose each other when the world told them they should want something different. When she finished, her granddaughter looked up at her with wide eyes. "That is the most romantic story I have ever heard." "It was not always romantic at the time," Helena said honestly. "Parts of it were terrifying, but looking back now, I would not change a single moment. Every difficult decision, every challenge, every risk, they all led me here. To this life, this family, this love." Yates, who had been dozing in his own chair nearby, opened his eyes and smiled at her. Even in his 70s, even with silver hair and weathered skin, he was still the handsomest man she had ever seen. "Still telling stories about me?" he asked, his voice warm with affection. "Always," Helena said. "It is my favorite story." "Mine too," Yates agreed. "The one where I rescued a damsel in distress and she ended up rescuing me right back." "I like that version," Helena said softly. As the sun set on another day, Helena Xavier looked around at everything they had built together and felt nothing but gratitude. She had taken a terrifying leap into the unknown, and it had led her home. Not to a place, but to a person, to a life, to a love that had sustained her through every joy and challenge the years had brought. She had escaped an arranged marriage. A cowboy had offered protection. And together, They had found what neither had been looking for but both had desperately needed. A true partner, a genuine love, a soulmate discovered accidentally but cherished intentionally every day thereafter. That night, lying in bed beside the man she had loved for more than 50 years, Helena whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." "For what?" Yates murmured sleepily. "For being at that creek, for choosing to help, for loving me." Yates pulled her close and she felt him smile against her hair. "You never have to thank me for that. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." They fell asleep as they had for thousands of nights before, wrapped in each other's arms. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would endure long after they were gone, living on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. Helena Grayson had fled Trinity, Texas in 1876, desperate and afraid. Helena Xavier died peacefully in her sleep in 1920, surrounded by family and filled with the knowledge that her life had mattered, that she had made the right choice, that love was always worth the risk. And in the end, that made all the difference.